doing. Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stuff.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. It is Monday morning. Sam, how you doing?
Doing well, Steven. Doing well. How about you?
Doing great. Doing well. I'm in the mom's basement.
No Christmas tree this time, though.
So, looking forward to it. Hope the internet stays strong.
Yeah. We got rough internet on location. We got an IFB that died twice on the last show, and who knows if it's going to survive this time. We got all kinds of things just about to fly apart at the seams over here.
We're going to do it, though. We're powered by training camp updates and videos and hype machines. I mean, it's just getting me through the summer months here, Sam. It's starting to get real, and it's Hall of Fame game week this week. We have a real football game this week, Sam.
Well, we have a football game. I don't know if it's a real one.
There is a football game. Let's start the show. There's some breaking news and some other little odds and ends coming out of training camp. And then we're going to get into the QB contracts. We had planned to talk QB contracts before we even knew that Tua and Jordan Love were going to sign their new deals. So we'll get into that, and we'll talk Dak and what that means for the Cowboys. But first, Taylor Decker has just re-signed, extended by the Detroit Lions as the Lions continue to keep their nucleus intact. This was just reported by Adam Schefter just before we went live here, Sam.
Yeah, 3 years, like $60 million deal with 30-ish guaranteed for Decker, who he's become the kind of epitome of, I mean, maybe solid is actually doing him a disservice. He's a pretty good caliber left tackle. And now that they completely locked down that offensive line, which on paper heading into the season, you know, they're number one on PFF's offensive line rankings. They are probably the best offensive line in the league right now as we head into the season with Philadelphia experiencing some turnover, you know, the retirement of Jason Kelce. Taylor Decker had an 81 grade last season, was above 73, 74 in both run blocking and pass blocking. He's a good caliber guy to have on the blind side, you know, not as good as Penei Sewell on the other side, but a good player to have locked down for the next 3 years.
I'll tell you what this means for the Lions here. The only players on their team now that are going to be free agents, at least on the offensive side of the ball, the only guys that we have is Kevin Zeitler, the starting right guard, who's getting to the end of his career. They signed him to a 1-year deal to come in and, you know, be the number 5 offensive lineman, where he's, you know, pretty good in that role. So they are locked in on the offensive side of the ball. And even defensively, the only guys that they're really looking at hitting free agency, Carlton Davis, who they just traded for at cornerback, and Alim McNeil at defensive tackle. Marcus Davenport's in there on a 1-year deal as well. But I'll say, man, even with the Jared Goff contract, that they're going to have to pay Aiden Hutchinson soon here. But the nucleus for the Detroit Lions, it's not just, hey, they peaked in 2023 and they were a couple plays away from the Super Bowl. The nucleus is locked in for a few years now for the Lions.
Well, particularly on offense, like that, or drafting well, you know, has enabled them to have this group locked up really long term. They've picked off the really top tier players on the roster and given them big contracts already, or Hutchinson upcoming to have the next one. But, you know, quarterback ticked off, number 1 wide receiver ticked off, franchise offensive tackle. Okay, this one's on the right side, but now they have Taylor Decker on the left side as well. So bookend tackles locked up. Sam Laporta, the rookie season, he had a tight end. I mean, he's going into year 2, so he's locked up for a while as well. Jahmyr Gibbs, an offensive playmaker in the backfield. This group is tied together for a while.
Yeah, they really are. So, look, I think we've talked a lot about the Lions and their team-building effort over the last couple of years, how they've built it brick by brick. I thought it would be more challenging for them to keep everybody together, but they're doing a really nice job, I think, keeping their key players intact, their young players getting extended, and their veteran players now. I think the Lions have a chance to make a little run here. So that was the news here on Monday morning. Thursday, Sam, we'll get into all the training camp hype. That's the plan, at least.
Mm-hmm.
We will respond. So send us your hype. Who's getting all hyped up in training camp? We will respond to all the training camp hype on Thursday. Couple other news bits, though. Our guy, Mekhi Blackmon, the cornerback from the Vikings, just a week and a half ago, you and I were touting him as the guy that should win that cornerback job for the Minnesota Vikings. He unfortunately has blown out his knee, torn ACL. He's out for the season. And we also have injury coming out of Cowboys camp on the defensive line as well.
Yeah, with Sam Williams.
Sam Williams out for the season. Dallas a little, depleted. Some turnover on the defensive line. Your thoughts on a couple of those early injuries?
Yeah, I mean, we've hit training camp. We've hit practice. So we've hit the first ACL injuries, the first season. And also, by the way, you forgot to add in, not an ACL injury, but Michael Badgley, the money badger, somehow tore his hamstring, not even at practice, before practice, and is out for the year. So that was...
I didn't forget to talk about special teams, Sam.
That sounds a little bit like you forgot to talk about special teams. I mean, so I assume that was like, warming up the leg as he was on his way out to practice, as opposed to like, because when you're our age, Steve, things just start breaking during random, you turn the wrong way getting out of bed. Oh, there goes a shoulder for the next week. I'm assuming Badgley wasn't just like putting on a sock and the hamstring tore right off the bone. I assume he was actually warming the leg up on the way out to kick some balls. But it was weird the way they were phrasing this, like before practice, tore his hamstring and he's done for the year. So anyway, kicker done for the year as well. Very unfortunate. But okay, for the Vikings, I don't want to kind of lump them together because obviously one is a kind of a regular ACL injury that happens in practice, and the other one was a tragic accident as a result of a drunk driver. But the Minnesota Vikings have now potentially lost 2 starting cornerbacks before training camp has even really begun. From where they would have been expected to be heading into the season. That's a massive blow to a team that already wasn't in great shape necessarily on the back end. Puts a ton of pressure on Shaquille Griffin to come in and kind of resuscitate his career a bit and be a really high-level player. I've seen Andrew Booth Jr., reasonably high draft pick a couple of years ago, being interviewed, basically saying pressure's all on you as well to show up and be... But that's not a great looking group on paper now, again, because of the injury and because of the tragic loss of their rookie as well. And then for Dallas, you've got, a defensive line that's back to being kind of Micah Parsons and friends. Now, that does...
and DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah, I was going to say, that does DeMarcus Lawrence a disservice, but, it's back to looking kind of weak again. Micah Parsons is obviously a superstar. DeMarcus Lawrence is extremely underrated. But it's the same story with Dallas, right? You're back to relying on those rookies. Marshawn Nealand now actually needs to make some noise. Maybe Adigizua needs to take a step forward. Mozzie Smith, he's looking strong in training camp, but he had a disastrous rookie year, and she needs to show that he can be something like the guy they expected him to be.
Yeah, for Dallas, they were deeper last year. Even a guy like Dante Fowler in the rotation, a good rotational player at this point in his career. So yeah, a guy like Nealand, who they drafted pretty high, they are going to need more from him as that edge 3. More pressure on him, as they rotate him in with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Look, I still think they'll be fine, but this hurts the depth, I think, for Dallas, and as you mentioned, for Minnesota. Depth already a bit of an issue and just got worse with that Mekhi Blackmon injury. So it'll be interesting to see how Minnesota handles that and especially how they adjust defensively, right? And how they didn't feel like they had the horses to rush the passer and maybe play a ton of man coverage last year. That has absolutely taken a hit over these last few weeks for the Vikings.
Yep. Definitely.
Well, as a busy parent, you want to give your kids a head start in their financial future, but investing can often be both confusing and time-consuming. Fabric by Gerber Life, though, they make it easy for you to set up an investment account for your child that grows with them and helps prepare for their financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. UGMA stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can invest when they're minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Sam. I also wanted to report back from Patriots camp.
Yes.
I did attend practice number 2 for the New England Patriots, and it was one of the most uneventful training camp practices I've ever been to.
Yeah, perfect.
It was right behind when I flew out to Kansas City to watch the Chiefs do a walkthrough, not knowing which day of practice it was before PFF flew me out there to the middle of nowhere, Missouri. Patriots offense, I think some of the same issues that we've talked about and question marks from last year will carry over. Offensive line, they're rotating a lot at tackle, trying to figure out their best tackle combination, really their best offensive line combination. There was a lot of pressure there. I did watch Drake May closely, of course. I was impressed by May in his footwork, right? I was watching the footwork and how he got to second reads. It looked like they were really focused on that particular day, and that was one of my big questions about May. When he resets, his accuracy was kind of scattershot at UNC. Looked better in this one practice, but just from a team perspective, Patriots, and it wasn't just this day, it was like all reports coming out of New England practice the last few days. The defense is ahead of the offense looking, like they're still trying to figure things out on the O-line and outside, and inconsistent quarterback play.
So who made the best catch of the practice when you were there, because he's now the number 1 Patriots wide receiver?
I think it was Jalen Polk.
There you go. See?
I think it was Polk dig route, number 1.
Done.
There is some buzz. Javon Baker's making plays. Polk's making some plays. I do believe those rookies will get a chance to play pretty early on for the Patriots. And like I said, with the offensive line, it does feel like they've got a slew of guards and centers that are at least guards that could be reasonable, but they're trying to figure out the tackle situation. Chuks Okorafor, either at left or right tackle. The rookie third rounder out of Penn State, Caden Wallace. There was a lot. Drake May was running for his life quite often that particular day and other days. So the O-line is going to be it's going to be a big key here for New England trying to shore that up.
There we go. There's our reporter on location. No longer on location.
Yeah, practice ended, and I was like, well, that's it. There was your guy Marcus Jones made a great play. The one deep pass, nice pass breakup. That dude could still play the slot corner. Really athletic. But yeah, there were not a lot of downfield passes or big play opportunities in this particular practice. And that's what I saw.
Nice. Good work, our intrepid reporter.
Thank you. So do we want to get into some QB contracts here?
Yeah, so when we sort of set this show, there were the 3 looming big money quarterback contracts, 2 of which got done. But between setting the show and doing the show, it doesn't really change the show, because our whole purpose was to talk about effectively, are we buying or selling, whether each one of these 3 big quarterbacks deserves the big top of money type of contract they're about to get. 2 of them already got that deal, and the one remaining is probably going to be the highest number of all of them. So it still works, but yeah, we got 2 massive deals signed.
All right, let's start with Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. It's a 4-year, $212.4 million extension with $167 million in guarantees. When you start to put the APY or AAV together, just behind Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, and now eventually later on became lower than Jordan Love's. But Tua gets his deal. He's getting paid by the Dolphins. What are your initial reactions to Tua's big contract?
Yeah, so the funny thing about all 3 of these guys, I think, is that each one of them, I don't want to use the word red flag, because that's too loaded a term, but each one of them has got something to be a little bit scared about, right, if you're the team investing in them. And maybe they have talked themselves out of that. Maybe they've decided they're 100% convinced they're bought in, whatever, that's why they're giving them money. Or maybe they're doing that knowing in the back of their head that there's something there to be scared about. And obviously Tua, you've got the sort of lingering specter of, is he a system quarterback? Like, is he the product of Mike McDaniel's offense and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, all the speed that they've assembled? And is he actually driving any of this? And to a degree, it doesn't matter, right? This is kind of like the Brock Purdy conversation where I always talk about that credit pie chart and how much of the pie should Tua get versus Tyreek Hill, Mike McDaniel, et cetera. And ultimately, we don't really know. And it doesn't matter as long as they all remain intact. Where it starts to matter is when you give them the contract, because fundamentally, once they're all in the building, it doesn't matter. But keeping them all in the building becomes more difficult when you have to start assigning a dollar figure to how much each guy gets. So previously, it was easy. Tua wasn't earning that much money. We have money to go around. Tyreek Hill can get a deal, blah, blah, blah. Now, we just gave Tua top-of-the-market quarterback money, so now it becomes harder to give everybody else money and keep them all intact. Tyreek Hill already obviously sort of saying, hey, my contract is no longer top of the receiver market. I would like more money. So it's already becoming more difficult. So that is where I think it starts to get at least important how much of this is the quarterback and how much of it is everything else around him. And that's where I think you start to get into an interesting discussion with Tua.
Tua take here. We'll try to be nuanced here. I think there's something to be said about the system. On the other hand, every time Tua's been hurt, mostly in 2022, not last year, the offense wasn't the same, right? Even with a Teddy Bridgewater, right? Like when Teddy Bridgewater replaced Tua, that felt like, okay, you've got Teddy. He's one of the top 4 or 5 best backups in the league. You still had Tyreek Hill. You still had all that speed. You still had Mike McDaniel. The offense just wasn't the same with Teddy Bridgewater. If there was going to be a time where the drop-off was minimal from starter to backup, it felt like it should have been that situation, and that wasn't the case. Even anecdotally, the 2 days at practice where Tua was doing his little, sit-in or whatever, the reports where the offense wasn't the same. There is something to, I believe Tua has been elevated by good play callers and great speed and big-time playmakers there, and he's also the best fit for this system. I believe both of those things are true. The other piece, too, if you saw the grades that we put up there, I always joke that, hey, player progression is not linear like it's Madden, right? You don't come in as a 65 and then you become a 70 and a 75 and an 80. That's not always the case. However, in Tua's career, we have kind of seen that, right? He's almost kind of ticked boxes as his career has gone on. Last year, I think the big box ticked was he stayed healthy for an entire season, in addition to cleaning up some of the turnover-worthy plays, in addition to getting the ball down the field at a really high rate. Yes, and helped by Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike McDaniel. But I think Tua's just gotten progressively better. Now, at the same point, new question marks arose last year. How's he going to do in the playoffs? How's he going to do in the cold weather? How's he going to do when they're not just piling on the Broncos in a Week 3 game in Miami? And some of those questions, every time there was a big game, Tua wasn't as good, right? So those question marks arose. But I think the trajectory is there, and he is a really good fit. My big question would be for all of these contracts, okay, what's the alternative? Are you ready to just, let Tua Tagovailoa walk so that you can get the next guy? No, I don't think, that's a big step to take. We'll talk about that with all the other 2 QBs too. And then the other one is, okay, now, but at the same time, you're paying them all this money. Can you keep that nucleus together? Because of these 3 teams, the Packers, Cowboys, and Dolphins, the Dolphins did the best job of saying, we have rookie contract QB. Let's be aggressive. Let's trade for Jalen Ramsey. Let's trade for Tyreek Hill. Let's pile on these other players. As that gets tighter in the coming years, is Tua the guy to elevate the rest of the roster rather than being a part of this really good roster. So I think there's positives and negatives on both sides of this thing here.
Yeah, I also think Tua is, anytime there's a quarterback where the sort of physical characteristics are obvious from watching his tape, it starts to force a narrative that isn't necessarily there, but it just looks like it is, right? So, Josh Allen being Josh Allen, you start to form. Lamar Jackson's a better example. Lamar Jackson being Lamar Jackson, it starts to force certain opinions, even when there's no evidence to suggest that's the case. That's why you have certain people sounding off at draft time saying Lamar Jackson should move to wide receiver, right? Utterly ridiculous based off any Lamar Jackson tape you've ever seen in your life, and yet because he is this super freak of an athlete, it starts to become a thing to the point where it gets spouted on like national television, right? The same thing is true with a guy like Tua. Tua is small, does not have a great arm, like he's physically not imposing. So you start to form these ideas of what Tua is as a quarterback, even when there isn't necessarily evidence to back that up. So I agree with you. I think Tua is a bit like Brock Purdy in terms of he's a perfect fit for this offense. And even though the offense is very closely related, Shanahan obviously begat Mike McDaniel. It's the same system, but it's different. It manifests different in each guy. Brock Purdy is perfect for that Shanahan system. We've talked about that before because ad-libbing is like his strength. So when the play sheet runs out of answers, Brock Purdy finds a play in a way some other guys aren't great at. Where Tua is a perfect fit for the McDaniel version is the timing and the anticipation. The stuff that Tua was amazing at coming out of college, it's now so good in that system. Like he's just throwing to spaces, like to these abstract points on a field, knowing that at some point Tyreek Hill is about to fly in behind a linebacker and in front of a safety and arrive just when the ball does. And it leads to him having like Tua's interception reel is awful looking because it's like, how did you not see that linebacker, that safety just standing there? And I mean, he did. He's just throwing it to a spot expecting a guy to arrive there at some point, and if something happens to stop that happening, his interceptions look ridiculous. But so it now means he targets the middle of the field incredibly well. He's so good at throwing with that anticipation. But now you start to get people go, yeah, but he can't throw outside the numbers. Not with that arm. Like he doesn't have the arm to go deep outside the numbers. Like he doesn't have the Josh Allen throws in his bag. And okay, maybe there are throws that he can't make, but it doesn't show up in terms of statistical production or grade or anything like that when you're looking at just what he does outside the numbers or any kind of sideline metric. I've been looking at like his throws last season just either outside the numbers or within 5 yards of the sideline or however you want to chop it up. His grade is amongst the best in the NFL. His stats are amongst the best in the NFL. It's not a problem. Like, again, maybe you're going to find the odd interception that look ugly, but his production is incredibly good within that offense, no matter what way you slice it. So, again, as long as all the variables remain there, it's fine. The question is, like, does he actually need all those other variables, and have you just undermined your ability to keep all those together by giving him the lion's share of the money?
Yeah, for Tua, I don't think the limitation should be discussed as, he doesn't make this throw or that throw, to your point there, Sam. It's more so, okay, am I trusting him to go win the big game? Because once you get paid this amount of money, now you're talking about week 17 when they play the Ravens and lose by 30, that you got to go head-to-head with MVP Lamar Jackson. You got to go to Kansas City in the playoffs, it's 30 below, and go head-to-head with Patrick Mahomes. You have to go in the division 2 times a year head-to-head with Josh Allen, and there's a difference when it's in Miami in September where it's 100 degrees and in Buffalo in the winter, right? And we saw him do pretty well in the snow in Buffalo in 2022, but there were also a couple big interceptions or turnover-worthy plays during that game as well. So to me, that's the bigger question with Tua. It's nothing specific like this throw, that throw, this type of throw, whatever it might be. It's just, hey, now you're the guy to go head-to-head with all of those other quarterbacks. And one of those dudes is in your division. Aaron Rodgers is in your division. The entire AFC is loaded with a big chunk of the better quarterbacks in the league. How are you going to separate yourself? So that's where the standard is. To me, it's about the standard, right? The decision that the Dolphins made, I think they had to make it, right? I think they had to go ahead and do this, right? Because, we joked a couple of years ago, was there ever going to be a team that just drafts a quarterback and lets him, even if he's good, lets him walk after 4 years and brings the next guy in just to have him at pennies on the dollar? And we haven't really seen that strategy yet. Maybe Minnesota has decided to start doing that. We're 4 years away from figuring that out, if that's the case, going with J.J. McCarthy over Kirk Cousins. But what's the alternative for the Dolphins? They had to make this move, and it's not is he worth this or worth that? It's just next contract up. This is the price you pay. And you got to put all your eggs in the Tua basket here.
And again, we always have this tendency to create narratives. Let's remember what that game in Kansas City was before we're just like writing them off as, oh, well, Tua's great in September, but once you hit January, February in the frigid cold weather, it's not going to happen. Okay, the offense didn't fire, but that was, number one, historically like an absolute outlier in terms of weather. One of the coldest games in NFL history, just an absolute freak show of a game to be playing in. Number two, remember, at that point, Miami had completely run out of pass rushers, right? Going against the Kansas City Chiefs. So their entire defensive game plan is effectively out the window going up against the best quarterback in the NFL and one of the best offenses in the league. Players that rushed the passer double-digit times for Miami in that game, right? Melvin Ingram, 29 times. They needed Melvin Ingram to rush the passer in that game. Justin Houston, 13 times. Bruce Irvin rushed the passer 11 times.
But they scored 7 points. I mean, that's why they lost. But they scored 7 points, and they had one deep ball.
Right, but my point being, if that had been like a 7-9 encounter, which is the way that game probably would have gone in a normal encounter, we wouldn't be saying, oh, Miami can't play in the cold weather. It's just like this could have been a game with like minus 1 million temperature where nobody was going to score points. But Miami couldn't defend because they didn't have any edge rushers anymore. So not only do they have geriatrics rushing the passer, but they had to blitz, which you don't do against Patrick Mahomes. So linebacker David Long blitzed 10 times because they don't have any edge rushers. Safety Brandon Jones blitzed 8 times because they didn't have any edge rushers. So now Patrick Mahomes is able to beat the blitz, pass his way to success, and suddenly Kansas City's able to execute their offense. You're like, Miami's didn't show up, Kansas City's did. This is a failing of Tua. It's not necessarily. Like, the defense having no edge rushers has a knock-on effect to all of this.
I guess. I mean, the bigger thing, again, you're trying to say, let's not create narratives that aren't there. And it might not be the cold weather. That's the narrative. For me, though, it's the same story as Dak and the Cowboys last year. It's the good game. It's the good teams. Right? We saw Miami put up more yards than any other team in history over the first 5 weeks of the season. The famous line from Mike McDaniel, hey, mission accomplished, joking around. They were front runners last year. They were the team that when things were going good and they're playing, the Commanders and they're playing the Giants, they're playing these bad teams, they could rattle off stats and points and rack it up, right? But when you're going head to head with the best in the league, there's still a question about Tua. Right? There's still a question, whether it's in Kansas City or in Miami, but more so road games, generally, they were not the same team. And in those road games last year happened to coincide with playing the better teams, right? Going to Baltimore. They go to Buffalo every year. They went to Kansas City in the playoffs. They played Kansas City in on a neutral field last year. So look, those are true concerns. Those are real things, but also I think you could be encouraged by Tua's trajectory heading into year 5 in his career. He's gotten better every single year. He stayed healthy last year. He's growing in the system. We used to look at this, if we're not just looking at Super Bowls and this extremely high standard, we used to look at this and say, yeah, this guy's progressing. He's getting better. There's something there to build upon. That is all true with Tua Tagovailoa. But the question also remains, is it enough to go beat, these other, because where does he rank among quarterbacks in the AFC? 6th or 7th? I mean, it's not in the top 3 because it's so loaded. So that's going to be the question here for the Dolphins and Tua moving forward.
Yeah, but to me, I think the question is more like it's going to be phrased as a Tua question. I actually think the question is more just the overall offense. Like, it's so good. It was incredible through the first 5 weeks. It's been incredibly fast out of the gate in each of the Mike McDaniel seasons. It gets caught up to or found out late in the season, or has for 2 straight years. It's like, it's not like Tua was still as good in the second half of the year as he was in the first half of the year, but the offense wasn't. So to me, the question is broader than Tua. It's more Miami's offense, the schematic advantage that they're able to generate in the offseason. Are they able to sustain that all the way through the year? Because in so far, it's been caught up to late in each season, the last 2 seasons. And Tua, as the quarterback, the poster child, like, he'll take the brunt of the criticism for that. And that may be fine. That's just the dynamic of the way the position works. But it might be missing the source of what's actually starting to cause them problems.
It's a fair point. Our friend JT O'Sullivan was on the show early in the year, somewhat early in the year last year, and he used the old school cliche, will this offense travel? Right. I usually hate that cliche. Hate it, Sam. But I think it was actually a fair point and maybe foretold, the Dolphins' inconsistency last year. So let's talk a little Jordan Love and Dak. But first, we got to tell you about PFF Plus. We do have a very special promo code because you're watching PFF NFL podcast here. We're going to go with NFL Show 25. That's our special promo, NFL Show 25 for PFF Plus. Our friend Nathan Yankee gives his fantasy rankings every year. And Nathan reminded us that he has been the most accurate in the business based off Fantasy Pros accuracy competitions over the last couple of years. Nathan Yankee's fantasy rankings, #1 in the business. That's all part of PFF Plus. Plus, you get the Fantasy Mock Draft Simulator where you can import your league and practice your draft with realistic settings before having your real draft. So it is fantasy season, it's drafting season, and there's no better way to get ready for fantasy football than with PFF Plus. Use the promo code NFL Show 25 right now.
Yeah, they give out like a giant trophy for those for like the most accurate fantasy ranker thing. I assume somewhere in Chris's house there's just like a shelf with a stack of Emmys, just Emmys as far as the eye can see.
Yeah. 18 of them over off to the side.
Right. When you see Nathan Yankee on a Zoom call, it's kind of like the same thing. He's just got this like wall of fantasy trophies behind him for those accurate rankings. So, yeah, get in there on the PFF Plus, get yourself 25% off. And most importantly, obviously, give you and I credit for the sign up. That's what the promo code does.
Yeah.
NFL Show 25.
Yeah. NFL Show 25. That's your 25% off. And we did it. We deserve credit for that, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
It's our show.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love is now the highest paid player in NFL history.
Yeah.
Jordan Love. Oh, so Jordan Love's the guy right now. 4-year, $220 million extension, $155 million guaranteed, and $75 million signing bonus. How about Jordan Love and his contract here, Sam?
What a 12 months for Jordan Love, right? We sign this kind of weird halfway house deal where it's like they're not 100% convinced that Jordan Love is the guy. Let's give him this kind of contract instead of picking up the fifth-year option type of thing. And now he's the highest paid quarterback ever. And really, so Tua, the question mark or the scary thing, the red flag, if you like, was, is he a system quarterback? Can he play in the cold weather in Kansas City? All these kinds of things. Jordan Love, the question mark is just sample size. Like, if you buy into what we saw in the second half of the season last year, it's fine. Done. He looked phenomenal. Like, he was legitimately arguably the best quarterback in football, capable of making every throw you want, spectacular plays, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers-esque savant type stuff from the pocket, incredible ball location, everything you want to see. If you buy into the idea that that was real, there's nothing to say about the contract whatsoever other than completely justified, 100% well done, sir. But we've been doing this long enough that we've seen things like that happen before, and it might not be real. It could be, and I'm convinced. Like, I watched him, he looked phenomenal, but it wouldn't be the first time a quarterback has hit like 8 games of that kind of level and then not backed it up.
So I think the comps for this are there's not many. There's really not many. So the ones that you and I bring up all the time. Last year at this time, we were talking about Trevor Lawrence through this light. In year 2, though, this was year 2 of Trevor Lawrence's career as a starter. That was 2022, right around week 8 or 9. Switch flipped, looked different. He was, and when we do this, and it's, some people think it's disingenuous when you use data like this. Other times, I do think it tells a story, or it's at least trying to tell a story. When you cut the season in half or whatever, especially for young quarterbacks, you say, well, since week 8, since week 9, and this is what we did with Trevor Lawrence, he was QB2 at the end of 2022. And for Lawrence, it kind of made sense because the eye test said, man, he's definitely playing better. Took him a year and a half to kind of work out some of the kinks, but now he's starting to play at the level of maybe not the generational prospect, but high-end prospect, right? Now, Love is similar because it was a mid-season flip, but it was also after 3 years of development on the bench. and after a first season where it was his first year as a starter. So there's really not a whole lot of comps. We did this with Baker Mayfield in his third season, right? 2020. After the midway point, it was like, man, 90 plus great. He looked great.
That's the best.
So there's some comps, but there's not. Jordan Love did it first year as starter, where it was really the tale of two seasons as in his first year.
No, I mean, it's definitely unusual. The Baker Mayfield one, I think, is definitely the best comp for what we saw last year in terms of it doesn't always stay, right? Like Baker Mayfield in 2020, so third year in the league, came in as a rookie, set rookie records as a touchdown record. Year 2 unraveled, that was bad, and then year 3 he bounces back, and at the halfway point of the year it was like a switch had flipped and Baker had arrived. And to put some numbers on that arrival, from week 7 onwards, and I only chose that because that was the 90 plus grade that really broke him out, from week 7 onwards in 2020, Baker Mayfield was QB2 by PFF grading, behind only Aaron Rodgers, whose numbers were like absolutely insane. Baker threw 20 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, had a PFF grade of 91.7, adjusted completion rate of 78%, passer rating of 100. Like everything you want is there for Baker. And you're like, all right, perfect. That's it. We saw incredible flashes as a rookie. Year 2 was bad, but it wasn't his fault. And then year 3, the switch flipped at halfway, and now Baker Mayfield has arrived. That's why he was the number 1 overall pick and blah, 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 right? Done. That's exactly where we are with Jordan Love now, only instead of, impressive rookie season, year 2, instead of the meandering midpoint of the story is different. But it's exactly the same dynamic that a couple of years into his career, we finally, the switch went on, and now we've convinced ourselves this is who this guy's going to be going forward. Like, if Mayfield's contract was due up at that point, I imagine they would have given him the giant deal that they never gave him. But it didn't. He didn't stay that way, and his career completely unspooled after that, and he gets traded away. So, again, not saying this is going to happen to Jordan Love, but I'm saying that's the thing to be scared of, is that even though we were incredibly impressed by what we saw, it was an insanely high level, and I bought in. I also bought in with Baker Mayfield in 2020, and it didn't happen that way.
I'm going to tell you why I've bought in, though, on the Jordan Love thing. Not trying to be a downer for Packers fans here. We're just trying to say, this last year was rare but not unprecedented as far as the turnaround for Love. I mean, there would also be Packers fans who said, well, you guys were just wrong about the first half of the season. He was fine. He was just trying to figure things out, whatever it might be. But I'm buying into Jordan Love because I believe that second half stretch, right up until the playoff game against the Niners, it wasn't just things were better. I mean, it looked special. There were special throws in there. There was the aesthetics of it looked like Aaron Rodgers for whatever that matters. It doesn't really matter, but there was those confidence play. Confidence was through the roof. He was throwing the ball into tight windows at an incredible rate, and he was doing it with a bunch of young receivers. And that's why I think I'm buying into this as well. We spend a lot of time talking on these shows, Sam, about Tua and Brock Purdy and all their weapons and how the weapons elevate the quarterback, which is absolutely true. But I think we need to apply this in the Jordan Love situation. I think he has good receivers in Green Bay. But if you told me at the beginning of last season, all right, we don't know, Christian Watson's going to be hurt. We're going to have a second-round rookie in Jaden Reed. We're going to have year 2 of Romeo Doubs. We're going to have 2 rookie tight ends. Another rookie in Dontavian Wicks. Jordan Love was growing with this group. And again, I think they're good, but there's no superstar amongst those receivers in Green Bay. And Jordan Love was putting up the numbers that he did and throwing the ball the way he did and making good decisions. There was so much to love about Jordan Love's second half. So the difference between, I think, his contract and Tua's, I think the Dolphins need to figure out, okay, how much can we take away? How are we going to build this team around Tua right now with this contract limitation? Well, in Green Bay, they don't spend a ton in free agency. They have a draft and develop type of system where they just sprinkle in a few free agents over the top. Jordan Love's going to develop with these young receivers. Green Bay is going to continue to do a good job drafting and developing players around him. And the contract won't limit their ability to build their team, I guess. So I think both of those things are really important. Green Bay has this really good infrastructure, plus I'm buying into Love's second half breakout, how special he looked, and I think he's going to, again, not continue to just get better and be the best quarterback in the league necessarily, but he's in this high-end status and capable of putting a team on his back the way he did at points last year.
Yeah, and even kind of connected to that, but very different, is unlike Tua, unlike Dak Prescott, who we'll get to in a minute, the Packers don't need the money to go elsewhere. Like with Tua, our concern is too much of that money relative to the credit pie now lying in Tua's bank account relative to Tyreek Hill, to Jalen Waddle, to all the other players they've got to pay, keep happy, keep in the building. The Cowboys are going to be dealing with the same thing with Dak Prescott relative to CeeDee Lamb, relative to Micah Parsons, et cetera, et cetera. With Green Bay, like all of their young playmakers are on rookie deals, and not even like far in the rookie deals necessarily. They're incredibly cheap. It's the youngest offense in the NFL. It's going to be the cheapest offense in the NFL. So Jordan Love can take all the money for a while and it not have any problems whatsoever. Like they have a lot of runway to figure out where the rest of the money is going to get distributed around this roster because it's so young and so cheap. So yeah, it's interesting that he did the heavy lifting with this group that doesn't look like it necessarily elevates the play of the quarterback, but also it's so cheap now that if they continue to get better and if they become a group that helps him, hit his ceiling as a quarterback, it's fine because he can take he can take top of the market money quarterback deal and it not have this detrimental effect on a roster that you might be concerned about for the other two.
The other piece that I want to address here as well, same thing with the Michael Penix thing. Green Bay, back in 2020, drafted Jordan Love to draft and develop him. We had not had much evidence of this strategy even being attempted in recent years. It felt like more of an old school 70s, 80s, 90s strategy. You draft a quarterback, he sits, and at some point he develops on the bench, and you go. This worked. It worked for Green Bay. I think it worked. I mean, again, we need Jordan Love to confirm it and continue to be really good. But kudos to the Packers. And there is a nuanced answer here too, Sam. We've said if they had drafted T. Higgins, I always use Ayuk, but I was wrong on it. Ayuk was off the board. If they have drafted T. Higgins instead of Jordan Love, would that put them over the hump in a couple NFC championship games or in the NFC playoffs? Maybe.
Right.
Maybe they could have snuck another Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. It's not as simple as, well, Green Bay was – you had egg on your face if you questioned Green Bay back in the day because they were close, right? They were a number one seed 2 years in a row and failed in the playoffs. Maybe T. Higgins puts them over the top. But the draft and develop strategy absolutely worked as far as Jordan Love goes, and the payoff is – the transition from Aaron Rodgers now becomes much smoother here for the Packers. So they deserve credit for that at least.
Yeah, the thing about all those what's the right approach conversations is you never get the opposite. You never get the A-B analysis because, like you said, you never know what would have happened if they drafted a receiver instead for Aaron Rodgers. You also don't know what would have happened if you just put Jordan Love out there year one, right? Like if the pattern is real and if Jordan Love took like half a season to get himself up to NFL speed and then the second, like from that point on, he's the guy, did we just waste like 3 years of and actually a couple of down years of Rodgers before we finally said, all right, enough's enough, time to move on? Like, did we just waste time of Jordan Love's career and set him back 3 years instead of just putting him out there, taking 8 weeks of lumps, and then Jordan Love would have been Aaron Rodgers anyway? Like, no idea. Maybe the 3 years on the sideline was instrumental in that development, or maybe it just wasted 3 years of his development and his career.
You and your counterfactual, Sam. Why can't we just say this worked?
I mean, it did work, but my point being, you have no idea what else could have worked, right? There might have been all three of those things might have been able to work, right? Drafting a receiver might have got you a Super Bowl. Putting Jordan Love in as a rookie or a second-year quarterback might have got you a Super Bowl. And now the current iteration might get you a Super Bowl. Like, all three might be the right way to go, or none of them might be the right way to go.
But you started this by saying it's been a crazy 12 months for Love. I mean, it really has been, right? Last year at this time, he was going into his first year as a starter. he had signed a little halfway contract, like, here, this will tide you over for a little bit. You get some money, but we're not giving you the big deal. We don't know what you are yet. And halfway through the season, it was like they were playing a whole different game. His QBs and receivers on different pages, inconsistency at the end of games with the game on the line, and then all of a sudden, right around Thanksgiving, maybe a little bit before, Jordan Love looks like a star. And I believe the real Jordan Love, by the way, is going to be somewhere in between that. I don't think he'll be as good as Aaron Rodgers, right? That's not going out on a crazy limb, even though that stretch of play, he was in that, I think, in that world. But I still think he'll be more than good enough to justify this deal. And to be clear, the dynamic of his previous contract was like the reading between the lines, or the sort of the implicit the implication of that from Green Bay's point of view is that they weren't bought in 100%. Like if Green Bay believed that Jordan Love was about to do what he actually did, they would have picked up his fifth-year option, and we would have never signed that weird contract that he signed. The deal that he ended up signing was a sort of, we're not 100% convinced, but let's do this instead, right? So it's really easy to forget where they were a year ago because of the season that he just had and say, the plan worked. You know, it was always, everyone knew this was the way it was going to be. Perfectly seamless transition plan. Green Bay have cracked the developmental code. But if you rewind to when the fifth-year option and the contract stuff got done, that was the reality. Like, Green Bay kind of like Jordan Love. It was more that there was an out to the Rodgers thing at that point, and okay, it's now or never with Jordan Love. Let's give it a shot. But they were not like 100% bought in. We've nailed it. This guy's a star. Let's go. All right, so now let's turn this to the Cowboys and Dak Prescott. Dak still remains without a contract. Over the last couple of years, Dak has been different than some of the other quarterbacks who have gone to free agency. I think him and Kirk Cousins have both been similar. They really valued, and perhaps rightfully so, they valued the ability to be a free agent every 3 or 4 years. And here we are again, where Dak heads into the last year of his contract. That's different, obviously, than the Patrick Mahomes deal. Like 10 years, you're locked up, you're a Chief for life. Josh Allen with the Bills, some of these other contracts where it's a longer-term deal. Dak is headed to free agency again, and during this time, we've seen Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Tua, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love. Over the last couple of years, all those guys have signed new deals. Kirk Cousins, too. And here's Dak heading into the last year of his contract. Uh-oh. Did we lose you? Your thoughts on Dak? So, yeah, well, okay, first and foremost, now that Dak is the last one to sign, which has been the kind of the approach for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys all the way along, it's going to be the highest number. Like, Jordan Love just became the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. Dak Prescott is about to become the highest paid quarterback in NFL history if they get this deal over the line. And for the second time, this is like a rod that the Cowboys have made. This is a rod for their own back that they've created. And I'm wondering how deliberate it is. There was a tweet that came from John Makota, I believe. Let's say that's how you say that. A few days ago that I retweeted. And I honestly wonder if this explains most of what the Cowboys do in terms of a front office thing. He said, after today's news conference, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones talked off to the side for another 7 minutes. Jones, when asked a follow-up question about CeeDee Lamb's contract situation, quote, I'm just going to say this to y'all. Give me some credit, okay? You don't think I'm good with numbers? You think I know how to add and subtract? Do I know how to talk and sell? I realize all the criticism, and I understand it. As a matter of fact, I try to stir it up, and I have since I got here. That's good. Be relevant. It works. End quote. To me, that's an admission that the Cowboys operate on a front office level in at least large part just to create buzz, right? They're not looking at this from a pure numbers point of view and saying, what's the best way of doing this? What's the cheapest number we can get our quarterback in the building for? You know, how should we get ahead of these deals? What years should we make it happen? They are looking at this, at least in large part, and saying, what creates the largest media buzz? Because that generates eyeballs, clicks, that generates revenue. That's how we become the most, the wealthiest, the richest NFL franchise, and maybe the richest sports team in the world.
that's how you end up in this situation where they're arguably their three most important players and their three best players. None of them are under contract. And everyone's going, this is terrible. This is awful front office work. This is ridiculous way to run a franchise. Jerry's sitting there going, nailed it. Everyone's talking about the Cowboys. This is top-notch billionairing. Like he's sitting there on the bus, on the yacht, feet up going, I am just crushing this. Everyone else is out there locking these guys up years in advance. Nobody's talking about them, you know? Everyone's already forgotten who Trevor Lawrence is in Jacksonville. Meanwhile, the Dak Prescott Dallas Cowboys train's just got to keep on trucking. That's how they do this.
I'm just sitting here chuckling. I think your interpretation's pretty good. I usually hate interpreting it, and so if there's some truth to that, are we just wasting our breath? I know the morning shows are wasting their breath. The shouty shows are wasting their breath. Is Dak, I mean, they say some stupid things. Like, Dak will be better when he's not on Dallas. I mean, they say some stupid things just to talk about Dak and the Cowboys, just because you have to bring an awful take to the morning show every day. You got to bring something to the table, whether it's good or bad. But is that really the goal? You and I sit here through the lens of, okay, team building decisions to win a Super Bowl. How's this going to help a team win the Super Bowl? And when you hear Jerry, I think he wants to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But when he makes a quote like that, like, oh, yeah, we just want to have our three best players ready to break the bank and, unsigned heading into the last year of their deal because it's better for buzz, then makes me think maybe the Super Bowl isn't the number one goal.
Well, it makes me feel like, as a man intimately familiar with the mind of billionaires,
you sure are.
There's one thing I think that billionaires definitely believe more consistently than other human beings, that they can have their cake and eat it too. And why wouldn't they? They have so far in their lives. They're billionaires, right? It's worked out so far, right? Wanting all of it and getting all of it generally seems to work for billionaires in a way it doesn't for the rest of us. So Jerry Jones looking at this and saying, I can get all my guys locked up and create a Super Bowl caliber roster and create all this buzz and get the Dallas Cowboys as the top headline on every show in the world, America's team, and that's how we get the most money, and we're the richest franchise, and we're the one everyone's talking about. Like, he thinks he can do both, and maybe it never occurs to him, though I think it probably does, that one is directly working against the other, and like you harm your ability to create this team by like costing yourself more money than you need to for these deals. But I genuinely think that he believes he can do both at the same time. But clearly, it's a problem. Like, it's definitely working against their best interests because, like, Dak's first contract was onerous on the salary cap situation and the flow of money and on all those kinds of things. The second contract is going to be even worse. And you've got these other big deals to get locked down as well. Like, it is making it harder than it should be.
So the other dynamic at play here for Dallas, they've been probably the best drafting team in the NFL over the last 6 or 7 years. Bringing in guys, all these guys we're talking about. The fact that they have a decision to make on Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb and, the talent that they've brought in there, their offensive line, they always continue to draft and develop there. The secondary with Trayvon Diggs. I mean, there's so much talent there. They've been the best. And now the Dak Prescott before, would Dallas ever just let him walk? Would they ever just let him walk? Or are they just playing this game for the buzz, like you're saying? They're like, I don't care, give him the 60. Everyone else is at 55, give him 57, and let's move on. And then Dak comes out with a comment saying, hey, a lot of great quarterbacks that I know finished their career with different teams, right? Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. A lot of guys didn't go wire to wire with the same team, Aaron Rodgers. So now Dak, is he thinking, I'm with 1 foot out the door? Or is he thinking, man, I should stay here in Dallas. I got this really good nucleus. I assume, let's assume they re-sign CD at some point. You know what you're getting into here. Because if Dak's on the market, man, say what you want about him. He can't win in the playoffs, and you don't want to pay him $60 million and this and that. Well, you think the Giants would want Dak Prescott if he's a free agent next year, if they could walk away from Daniel Jones? Do you think the Raiders would want Dak Prescott to try to compete in the AFC West if he's a free agent next year? Do you think, does Sean Payton play that game and just give up on Bo Nix after year one and go after Dak Prescott? I mean, there's a lot of teams around the league. The Panthers, if they had to give up on Bryce Young after year two, there's a lot of teams that would love to pay Dak Prescott $57 to $60 million because their current situation is terrible.
Yeah. So, okay, outside of the whole Jerry Jones operation discussion and what exactly the Cowboys are doing and how deliberate it is and all that kind of thing, the scary element for Dak Prescott, the thing that would worry you as a front office guy looking at this and evaluating, is he worth the richest quarterback contract in NFL history? Again, for Tua, it was the system quarterback thing. For Jordan Love, it was the sample size thing. For Dak Prescott, it is the playoff stuff, right? And last year, I mean, we talked about this a lot. Last year, I think, was the most damning indictment of Dak Prescott and the Cowboys in terms of this is bigger than just like winning a playoff game against a good team. This is not the Miami thing of can you beat the best teams or are you simply a flat track bully and you beat up on bad sides. This is the pressure came on. You suddenly got a flashback to 20 years of Dallas Cowboys playoff memes and you completely seized up and played terribly. Like the Cowboys as an offense and Dak Prescott individually played horrendously in that wild card game against Green Bay. Dak had an overall PFF game grade of 60 and a passing grade of 56.5. This is in a year where he had a passing grade of 87 and an overall grade of 90. And if you look at his career for the postseason, he's kind of been garbage in the playoffs. Dak Prescott's career grades in the postseason, overall 70.4 and passing grade 66.3. And again, last year those numbers were 90 and 87 in overall, including that playoff performance. So Dak Prescott has shown that generally in the regular season he's capable of some extremely high-end play. We've got 4 years now with at least an 80 grade overall. He's capable. Like last year, he was arguably, from a statistical point of view, he was the MVP. From a narrative point of view, from a who did you do it against, your Heisman moments point of view, Lamar Jackson became that guy. But statistically, it was pretty hard to create a case for anybody other than Dak Prescott last year. And yet, as soon as it got to the postseason, where the games matter the most, he absolutely wilted. And then you contrast that, okay, it's an unfair comparison because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. But you contrast that with Mahomes, who every time we get to the playoffs is like, all right, time to take it seriously now and plays his best football.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why Dak wasn't even thought about as MVP is because he was pretty bad in big games. He was bad against good teams, right? There was a point in the season where he had a 90 grade against sub 500 teams and about a 70 grade against any kind of good team, playoff caliber team. He had a 46 grade against the Niners in their big matchup in week 5. He had a 39 grade against the Bills when it was, the Bills were the hottest team in the NFL and the Cowboys got wrecked in Buffalo. Played pretty well against the line. Like he played pretty well against the good teams that he played well against were teams like the Eagles in the second half or the Lions in the second half who had poor secondaries and were depleted. So to me, that is as big of a question about Dak. It's not just the playoffs. It's if you're the Cowboys or you're the Dolphins, both teams coming into the season, how do you say, oh, let's just get better against good teams? I mean, Dak beat up on the Patriots, the Chargers defense, the Giants twice last year, the Commanders twice last year. I mean, he beat up on the bad. How do you weigh being the front runner, so to speak, having all the good stats against the bad teams, and then saying, okay, when these big games come up, we got to play better. And so I think Dak had his best overall throw-for-throw season, statistical season, but it was also inconsistent against better teams. I still think he's still one of those top 8 quarterbacks, though, that you say, hey, is he capable of going on that 4-game run to win a Super Bowl? I think he is. And that's probably worth paying. But with Dallas now, if you're going to pay him almost 60, and Micah Parsons is going to want over 30, probably the highest paid defensive player in history, and CeeDee Lamb's going to be up over 30, how do you build a team with that nucleus intact? How do you actually keep that the trio intact and still build a team around them? You would have to draft at the same level that you have the past 6 or 7 years. And we know that that is a really difficult thing to maintain.
But so generally, I think a lot of these like big moments or prime time or playoff, like a lot of those narratives, I don't think are like they're just noise, right? It's randomness, it's who you're playing, it's whatever. But there are certain times where I think the thing is true. Like Mahomes, I think elevates his play in the most critical moments. I think that's almost becoming unquestionable at this point. What he's done so far in his career, like all of his best, when you get to the playoffs, you get the best version of Mahomes. He's consistently able to up his game or not lose his game even when he can't walk on his ankle, like these types of things. And I also think that we've reached a stage now where Dak's poor performance in the playoffs is becoming difficult to deny it's becoming difficult to explain away in just like variance terms. Like particularly coming off a game like that against Green Bay where it looked so much like they just completely, the moment got too big for them. I think it's a very real question that if we're going to make this guy the best paid quarterback in the NFL, are we convinced that he can not even can he put together a 4-game run that's as good as any quarterback in the NFL? Because the answer to that is clearly yes. The actual question is, can he put together that 4-game run in the playoffs? Because there's no evidence of that so far.
Yeah, he's got that one really good game, right? It was 2022 against the Bucs. Excellent game in the wild card round in Tampa Bay. Other than that, it's been pretty poor, right? That he followed it up with a 39 grade against the Niners in 2022 in the divisional round, and then last year wild card round at home as the 2 seed against the number 7 seed Packers, the 60 overall grade, 56 passing that you mentioned earlier. So, yeah, I think it's a valid question here. And all that said, I still think Dallas probably ends up signing him at some point, but I would be fascinated. It would be good for us. It would be good for business, Sam, if Dak hits free agency and we get to talk about that, leading up to March next year and figuring out where he's going to land.
Maybe that's where Jerry plays, 4D chess. Everyone's like, eventually he'll get his quarterback signed under contract. Maybe he's looking at this and going, think of the 2025 March headlines when the Dallas Cowboys are heading into the free agency with Dak Prescott, a free agent, out in the open market. Think of the headlines. That would cook. We can make some real money now.
Sitting back at his yacht, watching all the shouty shows while everybody criticizes Dak for not winning the big one, and he's just like, this is the Cowboys are in the news in March.
I do think, though, on a serious note, like if that becomes your analysis of Dak Prescott, right, a guy that's capable of an all-pro type of season in the regular season, but we don't have confidence that he can win in the playoffs. That is everything for Dallas right now, right? Like this is a team that's gone 3 consecutive seasons of 12 wins, and then craps itself in the postseason, and you're like, okay, but if you have a quarterback, if that describes your quarterback dynamic as well, you can't give that guy $60 million a year, can you? Because he can't. So, you're going to get the same thing's going to happen. Like that's inevitably leading to that.
I'll ask the same question. For Miami, for Green Bay, or for Dallas, what's the alternative? Right? For Miami, I think the alternative was scary because you at least know you have a fit in Tua. For Green Bay, they don't want the alternative. They just invested in Jordan Love. They saw enough, so there is no alternative there. This was the guy. This was the alternative to Aaron Rodgers. What's the alternative for the Dallas Cowboys?
But this is
picking in the 20s. They're just what are they going to do? Because you're not going to go. There's no one else that's going to be on the open market. There's no one else you're going to bring Deshaun Watson in from the Browns. Like, what is the alternative for the Cowboys outside of Dak Prescott?
But where I would argue it's different is that the sort of the scary red flag thing, this is the one that could be terminal, right? Like the scary red flag for Miami is Tua a system quarterback, and the only way that's a problem is if you don't do a good enough job keeping a team intact around him. Theoretically, Miami's going to look at that and they say, okay, it'll be more challenging. We can make sure this group stays intact. We can keep the pieces. All it takes is a couple of good draft picks and we're fine. For Green Bay, it's simply a sample size issue, but we've already seen that Jordan Love's capable of going on the run to make it happen, right? With Dak, it's if he can't win in the playoffs, it is a terminal problem. Like, it doesn't matter what the alternative is because the answer to can Dak win a Super Bowl is now no, because he can't win in the playoffs. So that becomes like, then you have to ask yourself if do we actually care about winning a Super Bowl, or is it more important to win 12 games every year, be, the most talked about team in football, and then it doesn't really matter if we don't get over the line? But if your goal is to win a Super Bowl and you have concluded that Dak Prescott basically can't play at that level in the playoffs, the alternative is kind of irrelevant because you've already answered that he's not the answer.
But is that a Dak problem or a Cowboys problem? Because I'm with you, man. I mean, I said it after the Packers game. I hate that stuff, right? Oh, who cares what happened last year? It's a whole different game. This is like the only narrative-driven thing that I might buy into is that the Cowboys, because they looked completely different in the Packers game.
Yeah.
This Cowboys team that was a juggernaut this season, rushed the passer at a high rate, forcing turnovers for multiple years. They did all this stuff extremely well. Dak having his best year, and they looked like they'd never played football before, right? Nobody's on the same page. They couldn't cover. Busted coverages left and right. They weren't pressuring the quarterback. They didn't do anything that they did during the regular season. So is it a Cowboys problem or is it a Dak problem? Because if it's a Cowboys problem, just bring Dak back and help you solve it for the Cowboys,
Yeah, but I mean, again, I think most of these narrative-driven sort of conversations are made up.
Agreed.
But I do think that there's something to, there's something to certain players being able to either turn it on in the postseason or not and actually go in the other direction. Throughout NFL history, I think certain guys have been able to do it and other guys are not. And obviously Mahomes is the best example right now of a guy who's definitely able to zone in, find his best play, and consistently get the best version of Mahomes every time you hit the playoffs. Dak Prescott appears now to be a consistent version of a guy who the opposite is true. And if that's the case, you do have to ask some fairly existential questions about how important is winning a championship to this team.
All right, do you have a final prediction for what happens with Dak here?
I think they end up getting him under contract and the number per year starts with a 6.
Just for the fun and for the content, I'm going to predict Dak Prescott does have a number that starts with a 6. With the Las Vegas Raiders next March, Dak becomes a Raider next year.
So we're just going to play out the contract. So, okay, who gets...
Play it out.
All three of them now, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. Who does Dallas actually end up signing?
Definitely Micah Parsons. Unless for some reason there's a lot of talk about him and Zimmer and the fit, and if for some reason that just doesn't work or Zimmer screws him up. But I think Micah Parsons definitely. I mean, if I'm going to say Dak goes elsewhere, I'm going to say that they sign Parsons, they sign CeeDee Lamb, and then they get creative at quarterback.
That would be ballsy. I mean, you'd have to give Jerry credit there. Whatever about, doing stuff for the headlines, that would be a gutsy move. Taking a guy, I mean, it would be the move, and maybe more so, it would be the move that the Vikings basically never had the guts to do with Kirk Cousins, right? To finally put a stop date on this and say it's not going to work with this guy. We have to go in a different direction. For Dallas to do that early into Dak Prescott's career, that would be a hell of a statement.
The problem is I don't know what the alternative would be, right? They're picking in the 20s next year. They draft Shedeur Sanders or something at 25, and they just say, we're going rookie contract quarterback. Or Deshaun Watson shows signs of life with the Browns, but it's not enough that the Browns are like, yeah, we need to keep going with this, and they start to move off of Watson, and the Cowboys try to bring him in. I don't know what the alternative actually looks like yet. It
would be very easy, to take this too far because Jerry Jones does not always just do the thing that generates the most headlines, right? Remember when they were supposed to be drafting Johnny Manziel, right? He doesn't just do that, right? But,
however,
yeah, can you imagine Shedeur Sanders with Deion Sanders over his shoulder in Dallas as the new Cowboys quarterback? That would blow the world up in terms of headlines and buzz and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're rooting for the news here. We're cheering for news and just buzz and
us and Jerry.
Headlines. Yes. Just like when I'm on the yacht, I'm doing the same thing as Jerry when he's on the yacht.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. You got anything to add here?
No, I think we're done. I think that's so.
All right.
If you were GM Palazzolo, would you have done? Well, 2 of the deals are done. One of them still remaining. Would you do all 3 of these deals?
Yeah, I believe I would. I think GM Palazzolo a few years ago would have maybe rolled the dice on the first contract QB, but I do think that the increased cap adds more flexibility, even though it's always going to be a percentage type thing. I think I would have done it, and I think I would probably first sign of feeling good about Tua, first sign of feeling good about Jordan Love. It's what the Packers have done. I would just do it a little bit earlier.
I love that we still have GM Palazzolo down here on the screen.
Oh, there he is. Would I have done? Yes. Sign all the QBs.
Nice.
But always draft QBs too, just in case, right? Like if Dallas, if they tried, listen, to their credit, they brought in Trey Lance, just in case. Now, if they knew behind the scenes that Trey Lance was ready to take over, it's easier to let him walk. So good move by Dallas. Now, maybe not for a fourth rounder, but good move to bring in a next guy just in case, right? So keep doing that as well.
Yeah, I would definitely have done the first two deals. I do think that there's a chance I would talk myself out of signing Dak Prescott. And to a degree, it would be because of the position they've let this get to. Like maybe if I maybe I would have done the deal like 18 months ago and locked him up long-term then. But where it is now, with the number having to start with a 6 potentially, and I'm looking at this being like, not only am I making him the highest paid quarterback ever, I'm like moving the needle on that. And I have a quarterback that I don't even know if he can win in the playoffs. I don't know if I can do that. Like, I think I might have to go and roll the dice on something else. And the one area where it's different for Dallas is, remember, Jerry is his own boss. Jerry doesn't have to worry about job security. Jerry's not going, I can't make that move. What if it doesn't work out? Pfft, who cares? If it doesn't work out, I own the team. What are they going to do, fire me?
That's what GM Steve really wants to just own the team to have that type of job security.
Right.
That's what I would do. Raise billions to own the team. All right, man. Good stuff. That was fun. Fun little discussion. This week, we'll talk about the training camp buzz on Thursday. And then Thursday night, we do have a football game, Sam, the Hall of Fame game, Texans and Bears. So getting closer. Week and a half away from a full slate of preseason action.
I assume we're not seeing Caleb Williams in that game, right?
No, it was amazing news 2 years ago when Josh Jacobs played a couple series in the Hall of Fame game for the Raiders.
Right.
Because he's a starter, right? I mean, you almost never see the starters. So.
Yeah. So Tyson Bagent time.
Davis Mills.
Let's go.
All right, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Thursday with more PFF NFL Podcast.